215th Contact, Saturday, February 28, 1987, 2:09 am. Billy says my first question today refers to the massacre of the Palestinian refugees in Sabra and Shatila in the year 1982. We already talked about this once, but on the one hand, nothing was held in writing in relation to this, and on the other hand, your answer wasn't sufficient enough. The events were horrifying, with which more than 3,000 people were brutally and bestially murdered on the 15th or 16th of September, 1982. In addition, it was never determined as to who the real ringleaders, respectively main perpetrators, actually were, who gave the order for this massacre. Can you now say this clearly and plainly, I mean, who the main responsible person was or who the main responsible persons were? Quetzal says there were 3,468 people who lost their lives in the massacres. There were two real culprits, namely the Israeli Prime Minister at that time, Menachem Begin, and the Defense Minister, Ariel Sharon. Together, these two secretly decided upon the massacre, which Ariel Sharon then arranged with the Christian militias, respectively the responsible persons of Jmail's phalangists, with the promise that the Israeli occupation troops wouldn't intervene, following which the murderous militias could then freely enter the refugee camps and carry out their atrocities. Also with them were members of Haddad's army, who could likewise pass through the Israeli controls without difficulty and invade the camps of Sabra and Shatila and carry out their murderous work. Begin's and Sharon's secret agreement with the leaders of the Christian killer brigades never became known because all those who were responsible have remained silent to this day, and of course they will continue to do so. But with what happened in the year 1982, it won't be enough, because Ariel Sharon, who thinks the Palestinians look better dead than alive, won't halt his murderous deeds. This will especially be so when he arrives at the highest power in Israel, by being proclaimed the head of state in the year 2001. As I've already explained to you, he is an unusually aggressive man and a Palestinian hatter, as well as a murderous element that doesn't shy away from any atrocities, as this is also true of Begin. When Sharon arrives at great power, very much distress will come over Israel and its inhabitants, as well as over the Palestinians, because through his direct command, many open and secret service murders will happen. Through him, Israel will ignore and stomp on all liberties and human rights of the Palestinians more and more, as well as overthrow all political and human rights and rules and spread and arrange murderous terror with enormous destructions. Through Ariel Sharon, very much disaster, evil and pain, suffering and death will be spread in the new millennium because he will be able to indulge uninhibitedly in his murderous and inhumane ambitions, in utter irresponsibility and in uncontrollable hatred against the Palestinians in particular and also against the Arabs, without any great and serious objection being raised against it by the Israelis or by the world. Nevertheless, if such occurs, then it will only be lax and dishonest. Ariel Sharon's actions will occur to the same extent as those of the Americans who, under the guise of the fight against terrorism and the preservation of peace, will run on the same tracks with their global military interventions in the affairs of foreign countries. However, both actions will be the same, so both Israel's and America's, namely of a terrorist, respectively counter-terrorist nature, as this will also be the case with the Palestinians and with Iraq, as well as other countries, so also with a variety of distinct terrorist organizations, including those that are secretly driven by the state and those of the secret services of the state. Billy says there, the world can look forward to and prepare for a lot of misery, murder and mayhem, suffering, destruction, hatred and vindictiveness, as well as many other evils. Quetzal says that is correct, for that will actually be the case. Billy says then to something else. For now, I have, once again, heard of enough evil that the future will bring. How does it stand, then, with the progress relating to genetic engineering? You've already told me a few things, but now, in relation to this, The question arose in our group during a discussion: when will it have come so far that genetic science will merge plant and animal genes together in order to cultivate plant animals, respectively animal plants? Do you have any knowledge about this, and does such an action represent the natural scientific evolution of man? Quetzal says the science of genetic engineering is established in the laws of overall evolution, therefore, it also cannot be prevented, even though in the future, irrational ones, who will unite together in whole organizations, will want to destroy such progress by all unfair means, even with lies and with false test reports and impact reports on genetically altered plants, animals, and humans. However, genetic progress can't be stopped, in spite of all these irrational machinations of the genetic engineering enemies, because the laws of evolution will allow it that even this branch of progress will find its fulfillment through human genius. Of course, genetic engineering will need its time before it can function flawlessly, because every beginning requires efforts, researches, and mistakes that must be made. For only through these can qualified and real successes be obtained and can progress be created. But exactly this means that all negating things that will be undertaken in the future by those who are irrational and fearful, in reference to genetic engineering and, thus, to genetic manipulations in plants, animals, and humans, will be wrong and impeding to progress, as well as absurd, unrealistic, stupid, and irresponsible. For such actions will inhibit the progress of the better well-being of the Earth person and, thus, will slow down many vitally necessary solutions for humans, animals, and plants, and even make such solutions impossible. Due to the irrationality and irresponsibility of the genetic opponents, it will be that a lot of genetic progress for all humans, animals, and plants, as well as waters and air, and even for all of nature, will be prevented for many years, even though life could be prolonged by centuries through genetic engineering and just through the genetic manipulation of the person, by what means his health could be so stabilized, namely in a few decades, that he would almost never get sick. Also plants, fruits, and vegetables, as well as other food products, could already be so genetically altered in a short time for the welfare of humans that ample benefits would arise from it, but the irresponsible, irrational and, thus, the gene-negating ones will work against this with lies, deceit, and fear, by what means the actual successes of genetic engineering will also have to wait a long time for themselves, for when the first actual successes are achieved, from which the people will benefit often not even knowing that their food or medicines are genetically engineered and are only actually useful and healthy because of this. But concerning your other question, it will be the year 2002 before a genetic attempt will officially become known, with which plant and animal genes will be brought together. About this, we have acquired probability calculations, which show that the whole thing will report itself in Japan, in the sense that the genes of spinach plants will be transferred into pigs. Nevertheless, this won't be the first case, for the same and similar things will already happen prior to this in different countries of the earth from their scientists, as a result of their research. It's just that the world public will learn almost nothing about this, like also not about the cloning attempts regarding humans and animals. Even in the current time, many series of experiments like these are already running in scientific laboratories around the world. It's just that these are concealed, and to be sure, with the full authorization of the irrational and irresponsible genetic opponents. Therefore, ways of inhibiting progress are thought of by those who, out of complete ignorance and often influenced by sectarianism, try to restrain the development themselves, and to them all unfair means are right, and this will also remain so in the new millennium, at least in the first 2 decades. Billy says idiotic, especially when one considers that the progress cannot be stopped, not even when lunatics rant against it. But so it has always been on the earth, for there have always been pathological idiots, who didn't want to allow the progress, who braced themselves against it, and with this, often caused much disaster, by what means often many people lost their lives, who may have been saved if the progressive had been allowed, especially with regard to medicine and food preparation, etc. Quetzal says that is correct. But consider that Billy says, foolishness always first precedes reason.